It was a cold night in Anchorage, Alaska, the kind of night where the darkness feels endless, where the wind cuts through your jacket like 1,000 frozen knives, and the streets are empty, except for those with nowhere else to go. In winter, Anchorage gets less than 6 hours of daylight. The sun rises after 10 a.m. and sets before 4 p.m., leaving the city shrouded in an oppressive darkness that seems to swallow hope itself. Valerie Kessler was homeless, living in a tent in the woods, surrounded by snow-covered trees and the constant threat of freezing temperatures. Every day was a battle for survival, finding food, staying warm, avoiding dangerous people. Anchorage has one of the highest rates of homelessness per capita in the United States, and for those living on the streets, each night could be their last. Valerie had fallen on hard times. Like so many others, a series of unfortunate circumstances had left her without a home, without family nearby, without the safety net most people take for granted. She'd learned to be cautious, to trust her instincts, to recognize danger. But on that September night in 2019, she made a decision that would change everything. And then a black pickup truck pulled up beside her. The man inside seemed nice, polite, soft-spoken with an unusual accent that sounded foreign, almost genteel. He said he was looking for someone, a girl he knew, someone from the streets. Asked if she'd ride around with him, help him find her. Maybe she knew her. It was raining, the kind of cold Alaskan rain that soaks through everything. She was cold, tired, and the offer of a warm truck was tempting. Against her better judgment, she said yes. They drove for hours through the city streets of Anchorage, past closed storefronts and empty parking lots, out to Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, where they sat and watched planes take off into the night, massive machines climbing into the darkness, carrying people to warmer, safer places. He bought her food from a drive-thru, burgers and fries. They talked about nothing in particular. He seemed normal, maybe a little odd, but normal enough, not threatening, not dangerous. The man said his name was Brian. He worked at a hotel. He was married, just couldn't sleep, he said. Liked to drive around at night, clear his head when he stopped at a gas station to use the ATM. Valerie was alone in his truck for the first time. The interior was clean, almost obsessively so. She shifted in her seat, and that's when she dropped her phone. It slipped from her pocket and fell into the space between the seat and the center console. And when she reached down to pick it up, she felt another one. It was wedged deep in the crack, hidden, an iPhone, not hers. Something told her to take it. A chill ran down her spine, a feeling. The kind of instinct that saves lives. The kind of intuition that homeless people develop after years of navigating dangerous situations. She slipped the phone into her pocket, her heart racing. When Brian returned to the truck, she said nothing, acted natural. After a few more hours of aimless driving, he dropped her off near her tent, gave her $20, and drove away into the night. Valerie went back to her tent in the woods, her hands shaking. She waited until she was sure he was gone. until the sound of his engine had faded completely. Then she turned on the phone. What she found would expose one of the most disturbing killers Alaska had ever seen. The phone's lock screen showed a date, September 2019, recent, very recent. Valerie's fingers trembled as she swiped through the device. There were apps, messages, photos, and then she found the gallery. Inside that stolen phone was a video, and in that video, a woman was dying. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. A hotel room floor, generic carpet, the kind you see in any mid-range hotel. A dark-haired woman lying motionless, positioned in a degrading way, blood seeping from both sides of her mouth. Her eyes were open, but vacant, lifeless, and standing over her, filming with deliberate precision, was a man with a distinctive accent. "Camera bitch," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, mocking her death. Valerie watched in horror, unable to look away, even as nausea washed over her. The man in the video stepped on the woman's throat, pressing down with his boot. He strangled her with a cord, pulling it tight even though she was already dead or dying. And then he defiled her body, violated her in ways that no human being should ever endure. Even after she had stopped moving, "You're not leaving here alive," the killer said, speaking directly to his victim, to the camera, to some imagined audience. "I'm killing you." And then, most chillingly, "Sadly, in my movies, everyone dies." He spoke like a director, like an artist, like this was entertainment. There were more videos, more photos, different angles, different moments, a timeline of torture and death, captured in digital clarity. The man had documented everything, the entire horrific night, from beginning to end. For days, Valerie stayed hidden in her tent, paranoid, terrified, unable to sleep. She had just witnessed a murder, not just heard about it, not just read about it. She had seen it happen, watched a woman's final moments. And the killer, he didn't know she had his phone, didn't know she'd seen everything. But what if he figured it out? What if he remembered the homeless woman he'd picked up that night? What if he came back looking for her, looking for his phone, looking to silence the only witness? Valerie barely ate. She jumped at every sound, every car that passed, every footstep on the trail near her tent. The video played on repeat in her mind. That woman's face, her eyes, the blood, the cruelty. But Valerie knew what she had to do. She took the phone to the police, walked into the Anchorage Police Department on a cold September day, and told them she had evidence of a murder. The desk officer was skeptical at first. Homeless people came in with wild stories all the time, drug-induced paranoia, hallucinations. But something about Valerie was different. She was lucid, specific, and she had physical evidence. When Detective Brendan Lee, a veteran investigator with the Anchorage Police Department, pressed play on that video, he saw something that would haunt him forever. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to watch in my life. Lee would later say, his voice breaking slightly, "Not just as a police officer. This was the worst thing I've ever seen happen to a human being." Lee had seen plenty in his career: domestic violence cases, gang shootings, drug overdoses. But this was different. This wasn't a crime of passion or a robbery gone wrong. This was calculated, sadistic, evil. The SD card in the phone was labeled, almost casually, "Homicide at Midtown Marriott," like it was a movie file, a TV episode, just another piece of content. And on it were 39 photos and 12 videos showing the final, brutal hours of a woman's life, a timeline of horror that began with her alive and ended with her corpse being prepared for disposal. Her name was Kathleen Henry. She was 30 years old, an Alaska Native woman, a member of the Tlingit tribe. She had a family who loved her, a mother who would cry for months, siblings who would wonder why they couldn't save her. Kathleen had struggled with addiction. Like so many Alaska Natives, she'd faced poverty, discrimination, and limited opportunities. She'd ended up homeless, living on the streets of Anchorage, trying to survive day by day, and she had trusted the wrong stranger. Kathleen's family had reported her missing weeks earlier. They'd filed reports, put up flyers, searched the streets. But homeless people go missing all the time in Anchorage. It's a transient population. People drift, disappear, move to other cities. The police had limited resources. Kathleen became another name in a file. Until now, Detective Lee studied the videos, frame by frame. The voice in the footage was unusual. A thick South African accent, precise pronunciation mixed with crude language. One detective in the department recognized it immediately from another case, a noise complaint, a domestic incident, something minor. He gave Lee a name, Brian Stephen Smith. The name meant nothing at first, just another resident of Anchorage. But when Lee cross-referenced it with the Marriott guest list from the night of Kathleen Henry's murder, specifically September 2, 2019, there it was. Brian Smith had checked in that night, paid in cash, requested a room on an upper floor, checked out the next morning. The pieces were falling into place. They had a suspect. They had video evidence, but they needed more. And then, just days later, another discovery. Human remains were found along the Seward Highway, about 18 miles south of Anchorage, a highway that runs along the coast with stunning views of mountains and ocean, and dozens of places to dump a body. A woman. Long dark hair, badly decomposed, partially eaten by wildlife, clothes still intact. The FBI, which assists with major crimes in Alaska, tracked Smith's phone records. Cell phone towers create a digital map of everywhere a phone travels, and Smith's phone had pinged off a cell tower near that exact location multiple times, late at night, and in the videos recovered from his phone, there was more footage, a timestamp showing September 3, 2019, the day after Kathleen's murder. In it, You could see Kathleen Henry's body, wrapped in a dark tarp, lying in the back of Smith's pickup truck. Through the truck's rear window, you could see terrain, mountains, ocean. The location matched perfectly with the Seward Highway dump site. Police had their man. Now, they just needed to catch him. When Smith returned from a trip with his wife, detectives intercepted him at Ted Stevens' Anchorage International Airport. He'd just flown in from Washington, D.C., where he'd been visiting his wife's family, jet-lagged, exhausted, unprepared for what was coming. "Mr. Smith, I'm Detective Lee with the Anchorage Police Department," Lee said, flashing his badge as Smith collected his luggage. "We have some matters we'd like to clear up with you. Nothing serious, just routine. Would you mind coming down to the station?" Smith looked confused, concerned, but not panicked. He glanced at his wife, Stephanie, who looked equally bewildered. "What's this about?" Smith asked, his South African accent distinct. "Just some questions. Won't take long." Smith agreed to talk. He kissed his wife goodbye, told her he'd be home soon, and followed the detectives to an unmarked car. At the station, they read him his rights. He waived them, said he had nothing to hide. "I'm happy to help with whatever you need," Smith said, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair in the interrogation room. And for the next several hours, detectives slowly tightened the noose. They started small, following classic interrogation techniques: build rapport, make the suspect comfortable, then gradually introduce evidence. Showed him photos that seemed innocuous at first: shoes, feet wearing those shoes, a hotel luggage cart. "Do these look familiar?" they asked. Smith studied them carefully, shook his head. "No, I don't think so." "Should they?" "Take your time," Lee said calmly. Smith denied everything, said he didn't remember, couldn't recall, but his body language was starting to change. He shifted in his seat, rubbed his face, looked at the clock. But then they showed him more photos of his black pickup truck, captured by traffic cameras, his license plate clearly visible, highway cameras that placed him at the dump site, not once, but multiple times, time-stamped, dated. Irrefutable. "There's no doubt about it," Detective Lee said, leaning forward. "You were there, Brian. We have you on camera. We have your phone records. We have everything." Smith's face paled. He asked for water, asked to use the bathroom, stalling techniques, buying time to think. 2 hours into the interrogation, Smith started to crack. He admitted he'd found something in the back of his truck one morning, something heavy, wrapped in a dark tarp. He didn't know what it was, he claimed, didn't want to know, but it was there, and he needed to get rid of it. "Why would you dispose of something if you didn't know what it was?" Detective Lee asked. I just wanted it gone," Smith stammered. "What was in the back of your truck, Brian?" Smith hesitated, swallowed hard, then said something that would become infamous. "I don't know. Maybe a bear cub, or a mannequin, or a sex doll." "A bear cub?" In downtown Anchorage, wrapped in a tarp. The detectives weren't buying it, and Smith knew they weren't buying it. To understand Brian Stephen Smith, You have to understand the life he built and the life he hid. Smith was someone who lived two lives. To his wife, Stephanie, he was a loving husband, attentive, romantic. He cooked her dinner, brought her flowers, supported her hobbies. To his co-workers at the Marriott Hotel, where he worked in maintenance and IT, he was reliable and friendly, always on time, never caused problems, got along with everyone. But at night, Smith became someone else entirely. He'd met Stephanie online while living in South Africa, his home country. They played games together, online multiplayer games, where they built worlds and went on adventures. They talked for hours, fell in love across continents. When his business collapsed during South Africa's economic downturn, and he lost everything, his company, his savings, his prospects, Stephanie offered him a new start in Alaska. It seemed like a fairy tale, a fresh beginning in a stunning, remote land. They married in 2016, and Smith moved to Anchorage, but Smith struggled to fit in. Alaska wasn't easy for outsiders. The community was tight-knit. The weather was brutal. Stephanie was social, involved in community theater and local music groups. She had friends, a support network, a life. Smith felt like an outsider, the guy with the weird accent, the immigrant, the stranger. And then he met Alicia Youngblood. She was younger than him by almost 2 decades, adventurous, wild, troubled. And she shared Smith's appetite for something darker. At first, they were just drinking buddies, meeting at bars after Smith's shifts, having conversations that Stephanie didn't know about. Then, it became sexual, intense, rough, violent, in ways that went beyond normal intimacy. Alicia liked to be choked, slapped, suffocated during sex. She'd ask for it specifically, push boundaries, and Smith was happy to oblige. But it wasn't enough. Not for Alicia. She wanted more than physical violence. She wanted psychological stimulation. She wanted stories, fantasies. She wanted to hear about violence, about death, about power. And Smith gave her what she wanted. One day I told her I'd killed someone, Smith later admitted to police, and it turned her on massively. They began swapping increasingly twisted fantasies, making up elaborate stories about picking up women from the streets, bringing them home, and murdering them in creative ways, strangling them, stabbing them, watching them die. It was all fiction, Smith claimed, just roleplay, dark fantasies that couples sometimes share in private. Nothing real, nothing acted upon, but at some point, and we may never know exactly when, the line between fantasy and reality began to blur. Did the fantasies inspire the murders, or had Smith already killed before he met Alicia, and the fantasies were just his way of reliving it? We don't know, and Smith isn't telling. At night, while his wife slept soundly in their comfortable home, Smith would slip out of bed, get dressed quietly, grab his keys, and drive through Anchorage in his black pickup truck, cruising the streets, slow and deliberate, looking for women. He told police he wasn't looking for sex, that he was just stressed, couldn't sleep, had insomnia, just needed to drive around and clear his head. It was therapeutic, he claimed, but the truth was darker, much darker. He was hunting. Smith knew exactly where to find vulnerable women. 3rd Avenue downtown, where sex workers congregated, the areas around homeless shelters, parks, where people camped illegally. He knew their patterns, their needs, their desperation, and he exploited it. One night in March 2019, 6 months before Kathleen Henry's murder, he picked up a woman named Veronica Abau. She was intoxicated, homeless, native Alaskan, like Kathleen, desperate for warmth and maybe a bottle of booze to get through the night. Veronica was 52 years old. She'd lived a hard life: alcoholism, poverty, abuse. Like so many Alaskan Native women, she'd fallen through the cracks of a society that didn't protect her. Smith brought her back to his house while Stephanie was away, but something went wrong. According to his confession, Veronica refused to take a shower. She was dirty, smelled of alcohol and the streets, and Smith worried his wife would smell her when she came home. The scent would linger. There would be questions. He got angry. His carefully controlled double life was at risk, so he grabbed his pistol from the garage, a 9mm handgun he kept for protection. "I told her to get in the shower," Smith said during his interrogation, his voice flat and emotionless. She kept saying no. She was belligerent. "So I shot her." He killed Veronica Abau in his own home, a single gunshot to the head. Then he wrapped her body in plastic, loaded it into his truck, and drove out to the Seward Highway, the same highway where Kathleen Henry's body would be found 6 months later. 6 months before Smith's arrest, in September 2019, a hiker had discovered a human skull at that location, pierced by a bullet, scattered by animals. Police had recovered it, sent it for DNA analysis, but hadn't been able to identify it. It remained a Jane Doe, another nameless victim in a state where people go missing all the time. Now they knew it was Veronica. Back in the interrogation room, after hours of questioning, Smith was unraveling. His story kept changing, contradicting itself. The detectives could see it, the careful facade crumbling. He'd confessed to being involved in Kathleen Henry's death, though he was still trying to minimize his role, claiming it was an accident, that things got out of hand, that he didn't mean for it to happen. But now, exhausted and cornered, Smith was volunteering more information. Information the detectives hadn't even asked for yet. "Are you guys in a rush to go home?" Smith asked suddenly, looking at the clock. It was past midnight. The detectives looked at each other. Detective Lee leaned back in his chair. "We've got all night, Brian," Lee said calmly. "Take your time." And that's when Smith told them about Veronica. He described picking her up, bringing her to his house, the argument about the shower, the gunshot, the disposal of her body. He provided details only the killer could know. What she was wearing, how he wrapped the body, the exact location where he dumped her. Detectives realized they weren't just dealing with a murderer, they were dealing with a serial killer. 2 victims, possibly more. Are there others, Brian? Detective Lee asked. Other women we should know about. Smith went quiet, stared at the table, finally said, I don't know, maybe. It's hard to remember what's real and what was just fantasy with Alicia. But here's where the story takes a turn, because a year before Smith's arrest, someone else had tried to warn the police. Her name was Alicia Youngblood, Smith's former mistress, the woman who'd shared his darkest fantasies. In October 2018, Alicia called the Anchorage Police Department's tip line. She was crying, scared. She told them Brian Smith had shown her a video of a dead woman, that he'd done horrific things to the body, that he'd laughed about it, and that she believed. No, she knew the video was real. The tip was assigned to a detective. He interviewed Alicia. She told him everything. The affair, the violent sex, the fantasies, the video. But there was a problem. She couldn't produce the video. She said Smith had shown it to her on his phone, but never sent it to her. Without physical evidence, without a body, without a confirmed victim, the case stalled. Alicia was terrified, but she still loved him. It's complicated. The psychology of abusive relationships, of trauma bonding. She tried to get proof, slept with him again, did things she didn't want to do, all to extract evidence that police could use. But Smith was careful. He never gave her anything concrete, never let his guard down, and eventually, police dropped the case due to lack of evidence. Alicia left Alaska shortly after, moved to Oklahoma, tried to start over, tried to forget, but the trauma stayed with her. The images in her mind, the guilt of not being able to stop him, the fear that he was still out there, still hunting, and in the end, it consumed her. Before Smith's trial in 2024, police received devastating news. Alicia Youngblood was dead, found in her Oklahoma home. The official cause wasn't publicly released, but investigators believed it was suicide. She never got the chance to testify against the man who destroyed her, never got to face him in court, never got justice or closure. Alicia Youngblood became another victim of Brian Stephen Smith, even though he never laid a hand on her. In February 2024, Brian Stephen Smith stood trial in Anchorage Superior Court for the murders of Kathleen Henry and Veronica Abau. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, victim advocates, family members of the deceased, and members of Alaska's Native community who had rallied around this case as a symbol of the violence their people faced. The evidence was overwhelming. The videos, the confessions, the forensic evidence, DNA, cell phone records, witness testimony, all of it pointed to one man. The prosecution was led by experienced attorneys who had handled Alaska's worst crimes. They built their case methodically: timeline, evidence, motive, opportunity. Smith sat calmly at the defense table, wearing a suit, his expression neutral. His court-appointed attorneys argued that the confessions were coerced, that Smith had been exhausted and manipulated by police, that the videos, while disturbing, didn't definitively prove murder. But then the prosecution played the murder video for the jury. The courtroom went silent. Some jurors looked away. Others covered their mouths. One woman in the gallery ran out crying. They watched as Smith tortured Kathleen Henry, as he filmed himself committing unspeakable acts, as he narrated his own crime like it was entertainment. "Hit the like button," Smith said on the video, as if he were shooting content for YouTube or TikTok. "I get the Oscar, bitch," he laughed, standing over Kathleen's dying body. The jury took little time to deliberate, less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, sexual assault, tampering with evidence. When the verdict was read, Kathleen's family wept. Veronica's relatives held each other. In the gallery, Valerie Kessler, the homeless woman who'd found the phone, sat quietly, tears streaming down her face. Smith was sentenced to 226 years in prison. He'll die behind bars, and Alaska doesn't have parole for murder convictions. But even now, Smith refuses to fully admit what he's done. In a recent interview conducted from prison, he tried to spin a new story, claimed the confessions were coerced, said he was in a weakened state of mind after flying across time zones, that police took advantage of his exhaustion. He even tried to claim that Veronica Abau walked out of his house alive that night, that it was all fiction, stories he'd made up with Alicia to satisfy her dark cravings. None of it was real, Smith insisted. We were just role-playing. When pressed about the video evidence, the actual footage of him murdering Kathleen Henry, Smith downplayed it, said the killer in the footage wasn't sexually assaulting her, just poking her boob. "Is that not sexual molestation?" the interviewer asked, incredulous. "In your mind, it depends on the woman," Smith replied, his tone casual. Even the hardened interviewer was stunned. "You're not getting over this," he said. "The evidence is insurmountable." But Smith wouldn't budge. He's filed an appeal, maintains his innocence, continues to portray himself as the victim of an overzealous police department and a biased jury. And when asked why, if it was all fiction, he filmed the murders, Smith offered one chilling explanation. He was making a movie, not I but he. Third person, as if talking about someone else. The tragedy of this case extends far beyond 2 murders. Kathleen Henry and Veronica Abau were Alaska Native women, homeless, vulnerable, invisible to most of society. They represented a demographic that faces disproportionate violence, and that's exactly why Smith targeted them. Alaska is the perfect place to murder someone, Smith once told police during his interrogation. You could just dump a body 5 minutes out of town, and no one would ever find it. The wildlife takes care of the evidence. He was calculating, deliberate. He chose victims that society wouldn't immediately miss. Women without stable housing, without regular contact with family. Women the system had failed. Murder is the third leading cause of death among Native American women in Alaska. They're murdered at a rate more than 10 times the national average, and Smith exploited that vulnerability, that invisibility. But he made one critical mistake. He underestimated the courage of another woman living on those same streets. Valerie Kessler could have stayed silent, could have destroyed that phone, thrown it in a dumpster, erased the evidence, could have walked away and never looked back, but she didn't. What do you think would have happened without that video? An interviewer asked her months after the trial. Valerie didn't hesitate. He'd probably still be a free man, still hunting, still killing, and there'd be more bodies along that highway. When the verdict was read, Valerie was in the courtroom. It happened to be her birthday. "What a birthday present," she said, smiling through tears. "Today, Brian Stephen Smith sits in Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward, Alaska. He'll likely die there. He's in his 50s now. A 226-year sentence means he'll never breathe free air again. But questions remain. How many other women did he harm? South African police are now investigating his past, looking into unsolved cases from his time in Johannesburg, and Smith has hinted at more stories, more victims he may have invented, or maybe not. "We don't really know," one detective said, "and we may never know. And that's the most haunting part of all, because in the end, we'll never know the full extent of what Brian Smith did. How many lives he destroyed. How many families will never have closure. How many women are buried somewhere in Alaska's vast wilderness, waiting to be found. What we do know is this: a homeless woman saved countless lives by doing the right thing, by being brave, when no one expected her to be, when she had every reason to stay silent, to protect herself. She chose to speak up. Valerie Kessler is a hero. Kathleen Henry and Veronica Abau deserved so much better than the hand they were dealt. They deserved safety. They deserved dignity. They deserved to live. And Brian Stephen Smith, he'll spend the rest of his life answering for his crimes. But one question remains unanswered. How many others are out there right now, living double lives, hiding behind smiles and normal routines, waiting for the right moment to strike? If this story left you stunned, there's another case I've covered that I think you need to see next. Click the video on your screen now. I promise it was made for you.